Hello everybody and welcome back for another video. Today we're going to be talking about what lies beneath, and that's with reference to cathedrals and basilicas and these religious structures. And I actually sort of got there by studying these Roman styled baths that were in North America in the late 1800s. So I want to kind of walk through this, and just there's a pattern that I noticed by studying these structures actually, and coming across the work of some other people as well. So let's take a look at it. This is a place called the Piedmont Baths, and this was in Oakland, California. And Oakland, California apparently had a lot of interesting architecture that is no longer there, just like a lot of other places. And the reason why, again, we have to look at these structures over and over again, because they keep trying to create false associations for us and give us false cover stories. And this is just one of them with the church spires. They'll tell us it's all symbolic and the finials on top are ornamental, but it appears they were quite functional actually. So we kind of have to go back and look at over all this stuff again. So when I was looking into these Piedmont Baths from, apparently they say 1890 to 1939, I realized that they were fashioned after the classical Roman baths, or thermae as they're called. And a lot of the original Roman baths, they say, were built around the 1st century, but they influenced the design of 19th century baths in the United States. That's kind of interesting. And so I got the first floor plan from this Piedmont Baths, and there was this one large tank, and I believe it was a saltwater tank. But there's this one room, I guess, called the Tepidarium. And when I was looking at the Tepidarium, it is described as the warm bathroom of the Roman baths, heated by a hypocaust or underfloor heating system. So I wanted to look into these underfloor heating systems a bit more, and came across somebody's work on the I believe it's .net now, as opposed to .org, but I came across an article on it which I thought was really good by a contributor called Dreamtime, and I'm going to leave a link. And I'm not going to cover everything he talked about, but I'm going to hit on some points, because this is going to lead us into there's an observation, that something I noticed with regards to these cathedrals and basilicas and these religious structures, that it's going to tie into this, I think, a little bit. So he was talking about how these Roman hypocausts are a myth. And when you start looking into these, he's just saying here, he can find a single image of a hypocaust stained and blackened with smoke. So these underfloor heating systems, there was an area where they say the fire would be created, and that fire, the heat from that would feed the underground system, but where the fire, they say, was, you don't see any blackened stone. And there were other heating systems at the time as well. There's competing heating systems. One of them's in Spain, and I guess it's called the Gloria. It's similar in the fact that it's underfloor heating, designed differently, but you can see at the area where the fire is generated, you would get this blackened area. So they don't find that with these hypocausts, which is kind of interesting, but it doesn't stop there. These hypocaust systems, these underfloor heating systems, in the walls there were these hollowed out sections, and they had these what are called tubuli, and there's just these hollow bricks that are used to heat the bathhouse or even a Roman villa. So there were these hollow bricks, and the heat would travel through there in theory and heat the walls as well, and there by the room. But when they look at these, they don't find any buildup of soot that you would expect, just like a chimney, basically. Because if you don't clean these out, you could get a fire, chimney fire. So they don't find any evidence of soot staining in these tubuli either. And there was this what was it here? A research project sponsored by the University of Innsbruck, and these people wanted to try and recreate a hypocaust in a Roman villa. And as soon as they fired it up, they got staining, which was visible on the outside of the villa and on the inside along the walls. So, and they had issues. They had all kinds of issues with this project, and it was pretty much a big failure. And not only that, they were speculating that it's a carbon monoxide risk. The carbon monoxide gases could creep into these rooms. And so not only are they're a risk, fire risk, but they're carbon monoxide risk. They're inefficient with the heating. It's not evenly distributed. They cause staining. There's a lack of this darkened stone and soot. There's no soot staining. So they don't appear to even have function like the way they're telling us they functioned. A traditional wood burning heat source, that doesn't appear to be the case. And I find that really interesting, because we're rounding it back to the cathedrals now. I think I mentioned this cathedral every single video. Exeter Cathedral, again, they were digging down, and I forget, I think it might have been a car park or something, but 10 feet they came down and they hit one of these, what's described to us as a Roman baths, and it had this hypocaust, this underfloor heating system. But again, it was in the same location. So I wanted to keep looking and just to see if there's a pattern. So I was looking at Notre Dame in Paris, and in the 1960s, during excavations for a car park, ancient Roman ruins were discovered 80 meters underneath the site. So what is that? A little over 260 feet. And what else did they find? 4th century baths. And here's some of those. These are called pile. They were just stacked up on top of each other. So I'm starting to see a pattern here. So the builders of this cathedral, this is buried 260 feet. So the builders of the cathedral might not have necessarily known this was here, but yet they built on the same spot. Interesting. And then again, another Roman bath, this one in Bath, England. This was buried I think they were excavating it in the 1870s or thereabout, but it's got one of these Roman, this hypocaust heating, underfloor heating system, and there's a religious structure right next to it called Bath Abbey, which you can see in the background. Interesting. Then I found another church called the Church of St. George in Sofia. I believe that's Bulgaria. Built in the early 4th century as a Roman baths, and it became a church. And it's got this, what they tell us is this underfloor heating system. But again, two different cultures, they're building in the same location. And going back to here, like I said, this was buried. So this Roman culture, they built here. This got buried. The evidence was hidden, and then this culture, whoever built these cathedrals, abbeys, whatever we call them, they decided to build in the same spot. So then I found another one called the Basilica of St. Mary's of the angels and the martyrs, and this is in Rome, Italy, and it was built in the actual remains of a Roman baths called the Baths of Diocletian. So, what's going on here? There's this pattern forming, and you'll notice how looks like it's in a state of disrepair here. So when you look at the history of this particular basilica, apparently Michelangelo designed this in the 1500s from ancient Roman baths, and the backstory to this is after the siege of Rome, 537, the Goths cut the city's water supply, and the they gradually fell into abandonment and disrepair. And this is good. The once opulent baths of Diocletian then came to be used as an unofficial quarry, possibly for centuries. So the reason why it looks like the way it does, one of the reasons is because they were using it as an unofficial quarry. Let me translate what I think is really happening. I just kind of lined up 4 of them here. These first 3, I think there was one destructive event that took out what we refer to as the Roman Empire, and that's why all these things are buried, like Notre Dame in Paris and Exeter Cathedral, why this Roman baths was buried, and in Bath, England, why this particular Roman bath was buried. And it's not everything got buried. Some things just got destroyed, and that's why this particular basilica is destroyed, and not because it was an unofficial quarry. But again, that's my take. But so there's the builders who are the cathedral builders and the Roman culture, 2 different people entirely separated by a destructive event, in my opinion, but they're building on the same locations and sometimes in the same locations. So these hypocaust, and that's why I find it interesting that they don't appear to function conventionally the way they're telling us. So maybe there's something we're missing. I think it might be related to steam power. At this point, I don't know what that is. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I just wanted to point out this pattern because it seems to be pretty prevalent. So now I want to talk about a video update. Okay, today there's just going to be one video update, and it's with regards to these fake dilapidated buildings. They tell us in the 1700s there was this architectural trend of building structures that were already basically destroyed, and it was featured in this video called The Fall of Rome. And this is just one example. It's called Sham Castle in Bath, England, and it's already in a state of disrepair, but they say they built it like this. But when I was looking at these structures, you'll notice a lot of them are right next to golf courses, and the speculation is that they're using golf courses as a means of covering evidence, destroying evidence by putting golf courses there. And you also in North America, in Newark, Ohio, there's this mound builders country club sitting right on top of a golf course. Sitting right on top of these mounds. There's this golf course. It's just, it's unbelievable. So what I wanted to add is during the 1904 World's Fair, there's a park called Forest Park it was held at. And today, this park, I think there's one building left over from that exposition, but there's also a golf course here. And a lot of times, I think they just hide things without telling us, but every once in a while they'll just tell us they buried something in the golf course, and this is one of those times. I found an article, Professor hopes to unearth World's Fair Ferris wheel from Forest Park. Louisiana Purchase Exposition, St. Louis, 1904. So this massive axle, which weighed almost 90,000 pounds, it was the largest single piece of forged steel ever made in America. And it was so massive that their torches were useless in cutting it down to size, so they buried it. And this gentleman here in 1943, I guess they were looking for it, and they recovered this 4-pound nut from the wheel, from the Ferris wheel. But this person's name is William Jones, and apparently he worked for the wrecking company in 1906 that destroyed that fair, all traces of it, but they couldn't destroy this giant axle. And he insisted that the axle was buried under the park's golf course. And this is kind of where that giant Ferris wheel was. So they think the axle is somewhere by here, but you can see the golf course in the background. So yeah, they got all kinds of tricks. But so this stuff, they do bury things there, and sometimes they tell us, but sometimes they don't. So I think that's all I have for you today. I will be touching on stained glass, hopefully in my next video. I just wasn't quite prepared to speak on it yet, but so that's all I have to say about that. And until next time, take care. Bye.